Welcome back to the deep dive. For, gosh, decades really, we thought we had a pretty good handle on life's emotional journey. You know, that famous midlife unhappiness hump,
Right.
where our well-being kind of took a dip before hopefully bouncing back in later years. That was almost like a universally accepted truth.
It really was a consistent pattern,
Mm.
documented for years, a predictable arc that many of us, likely recognize in our own lives or maybe people around us.
But today, we're digging into a study that's pretty groundbreaking. It reveals this established pattern hasn't just shifted, it's actually dramatically reversed.
Yeah, it's huge.
We're looking at, well, an unprecedented reshaping of mental health trends, and it seems to be hitting younger generations harder than ever before.
It's a seismic change, really. It challenges basically everything we thought we knew about age and well-being. It demands a whole new perspective on global mental health.
So our mission in this deep dive is to explore the findings from a recent SciTech Daily article. It's titled, "The Famous Unhappiness Hump Has Vanished, and Youth Are Paying the Price." This report details some really crucial research led by David Blanchflower over at Dartmouth College, published in the journal PLOS ONE. We're going to try and understand this historic reversal, what the data is telling us, and maybe most importantly, why you, listening right now, should pay close attention to this profound shift happening in society.
Absolutely. We'll start by painting a clearer picture of what this unhappiness hump traditionally represented, the old idea.
Right.
Then we'll dive into what the new data reveals about its disappearance, and finally we'll explore some of the potential factors that might be driving this really profound shift in well-being across different age groups.
Okay, so let's rewind a bit, back to the old normal. How did scientists typically describe this journey of well-being, the one that gave us this unhappiness hump?
Well, for many years, pretty consistently since maybe 2008 or so, researchers observed what they called a U-shaped relationship between age and well-being.
A U shape, yeah.
Exactly. If you picture that U on a graph,
Yeah.
happiness tended to start relatively high when we're young, then it would gradually decrease through early adulthood and into midlife.
Oh.
But the good news was it would typically begin to improve again as people moved into older adulthood.
So that U curve for happiness meant logically an inverse shape for unhappiness.
Yeah.
Right? A kind of peak right there in the middle. That was the unhappiness hump.
Precisely.
What did that midlife slump usually feel like emotionally?
Yeah, that ill-being curve, or the hump, described the period where feelings like stress, worry, maybe even symptoms of depression often increased. These more challenging emotions would reach their peak, typically in our middle years, maybe late 30s, 40s, early 50s, that sort of range.
Right.
And then, thankfully, those feelings would usually ease off gradually in older adulthood. It was seen as almost a universal feature of, human psychology, a recognized period of heightened emotional challenge before things tended to stabilize or improve.
Puts the whole idea of a midlife crisis in context, doesn't it? For so long, this pattern was just ingrained in how we thought about life stages.
It really was.
But now it seems this established pattern has completely flipped on its head. What does the new research from David Blanchflower and his team actually reveal about this new normal?
Well, this is what's so striking. Their new study reveals that midlife peak in unhappiness has, it's basically disappeared.
Disappeared, not just shrunk, but gone.
Gone. It's not a subtle decline or a slight shift. It's presented as a fundamental change in the emotional landscape across ages. The hump just isn't there in the recent data.
Wow. Okay, so if that familiar midlife slump has vanished, what picture emerges instead? Where are people reporting the most distress now?
Well, instead of midlife, the study highlights a really profound and frankly concerning trend. Mental health is now apparently worst in youth.
Worst in youth.
Yes. Meaning the highest levels of distress, worry, depression symptoms are being reported by younger individuals. And then, quite strikingly, their mental health actually tends to improve with age.
That's a complete reversal.
It is. It's the exact opposite of the pattern we thought we knew for so long. The curve has essentially inverted itself.
That's such a significant shift. We went from thinking older age brought more peace after maybe a rocky middle period to now kind of paradoxically seeing older age associated with greater mental stability compared to youth. What kind of evidence did Blanchflower's team pull together to make such a strong claim about this global reversal? It sounds huge.
It is, and their findings are based on some really extensive data sets. For the U.S., for instance, they analyzed data from over 10 million adults.
10 million.
Yeah, surveyed by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC. And this spanned a really significant period between 1993 and 2024. And this massive analysis clearly showed that the midlife peak in unhappiness had indeed vanished. Ill-being was now declining steadily with age in the more recent years.
Okay, that's an enormous sample for the US, but, could this just be an American thing, a localized trend?
That's a fair question, but no. They found strong complementary evidence from the UK as well. They used something called the Household Longitudinal Study.
Okay.
This study has meticulously tracked about 40,000 households from 2009 right through 2023, and the UK data basically confirmed the exact same trend. Mental ill-being now tends to decline with age.
So, consistent picture on both sides of the Atlantic, but what about, the rest of the world? Is this truly global or maybe just a Western thing?
This is where it gets really compelling, I think. The researchers didn't stop there. They broadened their scope significantly, analyzing data from nearly 2 million people across 44 countries.
44 countries?
Yeah, including the US and UK, obviously, but many others. This came from a separate global mental health study called Global Minds, which covers roughly 2020 to 2025. And this global data unequivocally confirms the worldwide disappearance of the unhappiness hump. It doesn't seem to be a regional anomaly. It looks like a global reorientation of well-being across the lifespan.
That's incredibly comprehensive. Millions of people, diverse cultures. It's hard to argue with that scope.
So what's the crucial insight here? What's driving this shift? Is it that older people are suddenly way happier, or is something else going on?
That's the key point. The crucial insight, according to the study, is that this shift stems primarily from worsening mental health in younger age groups. It's not so much about significant improvements among older adults. What they found is that for people in, say, their late 40s and older, mental health patterns have actually remained relatively stable over time.
So it's not the older folks getting happier, it's the younger ones experiencing more distress.
Exactly. It's the experiences and struggles of younger generations that are fundamentally reshaping this curve, pulling down the overall average well-being for those younger age groups compared to how they used to fare. That's a really critical distinction. So the issue isn't a sudden wave of geriatric joy, but rather an unprecedented increase in distress among young people compared to previous generations at that same age.
Precisely.
Okay, so the million-dollar question then, the one probably on everyone's mind listening to this, is why? Why this profound change in something so fundamental to the human experience?
Yeah, and that's the big question, isn't it? And the authors of the study are actually very clear on this point. The specific reasons for the disappearance of the unhappiness hump are currently unclear.
So they don't have a definitive answer.
No, they explicitly state that further research is needed to determine the exact causes. It's likely a complex societal shift, probably not down to just one single factor. The main takeaway here isn't a simple answer, but rather understanding the immense complexity involved.
That makes sense. Big societal shifts rarely have simple causes. But did the authors suggest any possibilities, any potential contributing factors, even if they aren't proven yet?
Yes, they did put forward several possibilities. One significant factor they pointed to is the potential long-term economic impacts stemming from the Great Recession.
Okay. How so?
Well, for younger people entering the workforce or early career stages since then, it could mean tougher job prospects, maybe more student debt, greater difficulty achieving financial stability, all things that definitely contribute to stress and worry.
Yeah, I can absolutely see how those kinds of economic pressures would build up, especially if you're just starting out, trying to get established. What else did they mention?
Another area they noted is the issue of perhaps underfunded mental health care services. If access to good support is limited, especially for a generation that seems to be facing increased distress, it could certainly worsen the problem.
Right, lack of support.
They also pointed, understandably, to the mental health challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. That obviously impacted everyone, but it might have had unique, perhaps more profound effects on younger people's development, disrupting education, social lives, early career paths.
And what about the elephant in the room? The digital age. Did social media come up?
Oh, yes, indeed. Perhaps the most frequently discussed possibility, certainly in wider conversations too, is the potential role of increased social media use.
Right.
Its pervasive presence in the lives of young people today. The constant comparison, maybe cyberbullying, the pressure to curate an online identity, it suggested that could contribute to heightened anxiety and depression.
So if you put it all together, it sounds like younger generations might be navigating a kind of perfect storm. Persistent economic worries, maybe a stretched mental health care system, the fallout from a global health crisis, and this constant, maybe overwhelming digital connection that previous generations just didn't have in the same way.
It's certainly a lot to contend with, yeah.
That does paint a challenging picture.
It does. And it's really essential to remember, as the authors stress, these are suggested influences, potential factors, not definitive proven causes yet.
Got it. More research needed.
Exactly. The study makes it clear more work needs to be done to pinpoint the exact drivers. But these factors give us a really crucial starting point for understanding the current landscape.
Okay, so let's talk about this so what factor. With this fundamental shift documented, what are the real-world implications? For us, our communities, and especially for you listening, the authors called this a huge change from the past.
They did, and they really emphasized that this signals, in their words, a serious mental health crisis among the young that needs addressing. This isn't just some abstract academic finding. It has profound, potentially immediate implications for public health, for education, for social policy.
And for you, our listener, how does this land? What does this information mean for how we maybe understand generational differences or how we build support systems or even what we prioritize as a society?
Well, I think it means we really have to rethink our public health initiatives, our mental health strategies maybe. We can't just assume anymore that midlife is the peak time for distress.
Right, the old model is broken.
Yeah. We need to seriously consider how this shapes our interactions with younger generations, how we support them in schools, in the workplace, within our families. It kind of urges us to look squarely at the unique challenges they seem to be facing now. Challenges that previous generations maybe didn't experience in the same way, or certainly not at the same intensity at that age.
So it's a call to action.
I think so. It feels like a call to understand and address the specific struggles of youth today, rather than just applying an outdated model of how well-being is supposed to work across the lifespan.
Okay, so let's quickly recap our deep dive today. The midlife unhappiness hump, this pattern we thought was a fixture of human psychology for so long, has effectively vanished according to this major research.
Okay.
And in its place, we now face a reality where young people seem to be experiencing the greatest mental distress, and, quite remarkably, well-being then tends to improve with age.
Yeah, this historic reversal, backed by really extensive data from the US, the UK, and dozens of other countries, highlights what the researchers call a serious, urgent mental health crisis among the young.
And while the exact reasons are still under investigation, the potential factors are complex, maybe lingering economic pressures, possibly underfunded mental health care, the impacts of the pandemic, and that pervasive influence of increased social media use.
All possibilities on the table, needing more research.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. Given this historic reversal, if well-being now tends to improve with age, what does that imply about resilience or wisdom or coping skills developed later in life? Are those things perhaps missing or underdeveloped earlier on now?
That's a deep question.
And maybe more urgently, thinking practically, what specific actionable steps should our communities, our families, maybe individuals consider to tackle this emerging mental health crisis among young people? Steps that go beyond just acknowledging the potential factors we talked about today. Really, what kind of future are we building if our youth are facing such profound struggles earlier than ever before, fundamentally altering that expected arc of human happiness?
A lot to think about there.
Definitely something to ponder long after this deep dive ends. We really appreciate you joining us today.